kind of suffering? What kind of pain? What kind of things do you go through? And you can be honest, and this is totally anonymous. This is not, like I can't go, oh wow, I didn't know Cody Cox was struggling with hating Dylan Murphy. I just, whatever. I can't tell. But I want you to be able to see what kinds of things that we're talking about. And then I want to be able to think too, with you, as we go through this, what kinds of suffering that you're dealing with. So I see the bigger the word is, the more people have answered that. The smaller it is, it probably means it just is one answer. So you can see the ones that are common so far: depression, anxiety, stress, loss, loneliness, unmet expectations, being overwhelmed. The hashtags are hard for me to read. I don't really feel anything. Oh wow, okay. That's suffering. That's pain. Not feeling numb. Yeah, for sure. All right, let's go to the next one. These are good. Not good, but you know what I mean. Where do you go when you're suffering, when you're going through something? What is your escape? Is it outside? Is it friends? Is it, I'm not going to give a bunch of answers. Where do you go to escape? What is it that you choose to go to when you're struggling with something? Casey, will you start the camera?
Yes.
Awesome. Cool. So I see a whole lot of music, sports. I can't read that far. Oh wow, it's moving so fast. I can't read that fast. Talking to a loved one, games, overeating. Okay, there's an honest one. That's me right there. Somebody texted my answer, right? If I need to escape, I'm going to go get a meal, good meal in me. That will help me. Paint, my phone. I'm shocked that my phone is not like number one, because I feel like that's a big one. Spending time with God, that's good. Video games. Video games has got to be bigger than that. The wall. I don't know what wall means. Sure that, punching. I see punching and wall. Maybe those are the same. Those are meant to be together. Softball, friends, exercise. There's a lot of things we run to when we are feeling suffering, ways that we try to escape. All right, let's go to the next one. So stop sending in responses because it'll reject it. It might be kind of hard to read, so let me just read. What do you believe about God and His control or plan for your life? You got 4 choices, A, B, C, or D. A, I don't know, never thought about it. B, God made us, but He isn't involved in the everyday. He isn't able to intervene in our world. C, God plans some things in my life, but only the big stuff. He isn't involved in the small details. Or D, God is in full control of everything. He knows all and is in every detail. God has a plan for everything. So what do you think? What do you really believe about God? And it's fine if you go, I've never thought about this. I don't really know. What do you think? God made us, but He isn't involved. God can plan some things, but not all things, or God is in full control. So the overwhelming answer is the last one. Somebody that answered D, tell me what you think. Tell me why that. Why do you believe God is in full control of everything? Yeah, Emma.
Because I see it happen, like when I let Him have control.
Okay. You've seen Him be in control of situations and all the little details and the big details and everything in between. That's good. Let's go to the next one. These are going to be a bunch of statements about whether you agree or disagree, and you can choose I don't know if you just don't know. So here's the statement. You got to choose whether you agree or disagree. God could prevent evil or suffering from happening, but God chooses not to because God isn't entirely good. So God could prevent it, but He doesn't because He's not good. Do you agree with that, or do you disagree with that? That God could prevent evil, but He doesn't because He's not good. Okay, Okay, wow, I got a whole lot of disagree. I love it. I love it. There's maybe one or two that said they agree with that. Somebody was honest and said, I don't know, Byron, I got no idea. How many of you are just changing your answer constantly? Somebody did. Some joker, yeah, I had a feeling it was on the front row. Somebody that said you disagree. Why do you disagree with that statement? Somebody that chose A. Why do you disagree?
Because
God is always good. That's what you believe? And so you think that He can prevent suffering, and He does sometimes because He is good, right? Yeah, absolutely. Let's go to the next one. Same kind of question. The main obstacle for God to prevent suffering is that God doesn't know when it's going to happen. So God, what it's trying to say is God could stop it, but He just doesn't know when it's going to happen, so He can't stop it, right? So God's good in His heart, but He just doesn't know, so He doesn't. The main obstacle to God preventing suffering is that God doesn't know when it will happen. I love people that go, I don't know. So somebody, why do you disagree with that? Because all of you have answered that. 17 of you. Why do you disagree?
Because He knows everything.
God does know everything. Right? Do you really believe that, Jordan? You really believe God knows everything? So He knows how many hairs are on your head? That'd be kind of weird. Let's go to the next one. Individuals, people, go through suffering because of their deeds in the past. The reason we face suffering is because of what we have done. Do you agree or disagree? And then if you're like, yeah, but, then raise your hand and I'll take your answer. Do you agree that we go through suffering because of our actions, our choices? Do you agree or disagree? Okay, this one's a lot more spread out, so I need some people to explain themselves. Why do you, because most of you, almost half, said that you agree with this statement. So somebody that said, I agree with this. Tell me why that's true.
There are consequences to your actions.
Okay, there are times that this is definitely true. That if I make a really poor choice, and I drink too much and drive and I hit a tree on the way home tonight, I'm going through suffering, not because God put that on me, not because someone else hurt me, but because I did something that caused it, right? But there are also times, the other side, right? Sometimes you go through suffering not because of any choices that you make, right? Some people are born into really difficult circumstances of no choice of their own, right? So this one was kind of a trick question because it just depends. Next one. Suffering is intended by God to be a source of personal growth. So God intends suffering in our life to grow us personally. Do you think that? Do you agree with that? Do you disagree? You just like choosing the side that no one's on. Is that? No? Who said they disagree? If you're brave enough, and why? Why do you disagree with that? Nobody. Nobody's gonna. You're like.
I think the way it's worded makes it sound mean.
Say that again.
I mean, the way it's worded makes it sound mean. Like God's sitting up there being like, well, I'm going to hurt him because I want him to grow. Like, that's not God's character. But I do think He says in His Word He's going to use bad, hard, sad things for good and to grow and to prosper us. Okay, so you're saying that we do grow through suffering, but that's not necessarily God's intent? Or God takes it and He turns it. I think it breaks God's heart when we suffer.
Yeah.
I think He puts us through like trials, because it says in James, puts us through trials like for us to grow stronger in our faith. So I think it's true, but I don't think He like wants us to suffer.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not going to tell you what I think. Next one. This is what I do. I stand here and tell you what I think all the time. I want to know what you think. Next one, Casey. Everything that we experience, including suffering, is planned in detail by God. Everything that we experience, including suffering, is planned in detail by God. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you not know? Do you want to explain yourself? Somebody tell me what you think. Somebody tell me why you agree or disagree with that.
Like the enemy is very powerful. He's not as powerful as God. And so he throws stuff into our lives that, so, I mean, it's true to a point, but then it's...
You're saying not everything in our life is planned by God. Sometimes it's the enemy, and then God kind of uses that or takes that and changes it. Okay? Yeah.
I think like he plans stuff, but we also have a choice. Like we always have a choice to either take his side or take the world's side.
Okay.
So whenever we choose, like if it's not his side, then we're going to suffer from it.
Okay, so he's in control, but we still have choice. You know what you're saying, right? He doesn't necessarily, we're not robots who like, I love you, I'm nice to you, right? I don't know. My kids like to talk in robot voice. Like I was trying to do it, I couldn't. Yeah, but we still have choice. Okay, next one. Suffering happens randomly, not because of anything people have done wrong. Suffering happens randomly, not because of anything people have done wrong. Do you agree? Do you disagree?
I disagree. Suffering is sin. So,
who disagrees that suffering is not random? Somebody tell me what you think. Why? Yeah. Okay. Is it random though? Does he just randomly like go? Okay. You think he has a purpose in it? Okay. Suffering happens randomly, not because of anything. Next one. Next one. I don't know how many there are. We're getting close. Ooh, here we go. God is all powerful, and he can change situations to alleviate, to stop suffering. God is all powerful, and he can change situations to alleviate suffering. Do you agree or disagree with that statement? Some of you disagree. I like it. Tell me who you are, what you think. I want to know who disagrees with that. And what part do you disagree with? Nobody's brave enough. Is it you again? Somebody, why do you agree with that? God can intervene. We have choice and we get to determine our own destiny, but God can just step in and change things. Is that true? You think that's true? Yes? Jordan's shaking his head yes. That Jordan, sorry. Next one, Casey. Next one. Ooh, here's a good one. We know God is not all good because there is suffering in the world. We know that God is not all good because there is suffering in the world. Hey, Casey, stop moving the mouse. So, yeah. We know that God is not all good because there is suffering in the world. Oh. Bunch of disagreeers. What do you disagree with? There is suffering. Do you disagree that there is suffering in the world? But what do you disagree with? Do you disagree that God's not all good? So how can God be good and there be suffering in the world? That's what he said. That's what you're going to teach us tonight. I don't know. Kinsey said because of our decisions. What kind of decisions?
Someone else was saying it's our choice if you go down the right path or the wrong path. So if you go down the wrong path, there can be suffering.
Okay. What do we call a wrong choice in the Bible? Sin. Right? So we know that there is suffering in this world because of sin. All right, next one. And maybe the last one. Nope. Oh, this is good one. Suffering and blessing are punishment and reward. So suffering is punishment, blessing is reward, based on how we live our lives. Do you agree or disagree? The good things we get in our life are because we live good. The bad things we get in our life are because we live bad. Do you agree with that? Or do you disagree? Okay, we got a whole lot of I don't know. Thank you for being honest, because this is not necessarily an easy question. Who disagrees? Somebody tell me why. Why do you disagree with this? Why do you disagree that the stuff that happens in our life is because of how we live? Never mind. Yeah, Emma.
Okay, I said I don't know, but I
Okay.
was thinking about, I think sometimes, like, when we do suffer, it can come out as a blessing, like in some situation, and you look back and like, oh, I grew a lot from that. So, I don't know.
Yeah, that was a big IDK. All right.
I think the reward is finding the blessing in the suffering. That is the reward.
Okay. You all face suffering of all kinds. And if you haven't yet, you will. I was telling Connie before this, I don't feel like I've gone through a whole lot of suffering in my life. But that doesn't mean that I won't in the future. It doesn't mean that I won't go through bad things. We all will. Why? Because we live in a sinful world. A place that is broken. And we will all face it. People ask all kinds of questions. What kinds of questions? Now listen. What kinds of questions do people ask when they're going through a bad time? What do you think? Tell me. Why is this happening? I was going to say that. That's not a question. I'm just kidding. What do people ask? What did I do to deserve this, maybe? Or what did I do to make this happen? Why did God make or let this happen? Yeah, what's going to happen? Where's this going? Why does God hate me? Wow. That's a big one. What other kinds of questions do people ask?
Why me?
Why me? Who are most of, y'all listen, who are most of these questions directed towards? God, why? Why are we asking questions of God when something happens on this earth? We were looking for somebody to blame?
Because he knows.
Maybe we ask because we believe that He knows. That's good, Jordan. What about non-Christians? Do non-Christians ask these same questions when they go through suffering? Why me? Why is this happening? What's the purpose? What does that tell us? That they might still believe that there's something in charge and in control, whether they live like it or not. Right? Here's a whole bunch of questions. Where is God? Why have I been singled out? Maybe God has favorites. Why isn't God listening to my prayers? Why does He or she have it easier than me? Maybe God doesn't love me after all. Why do bad things happen to good people? Does God allow these things? Does He cause them? Why would God allow these things to happen to me? And what's God's purpose in it? I just want us to look at a few things tonight. And want us to look at a few things. We're not going to get through the whole sheet. I've already recognized that I don't have enough time to do everything I wrote down. So let's start at number one. Number one says this. Again, listen. We're trying to answer, what does the Bible have to say about suffering? What does the Bible have to say about suffering? Number one, here's what the Bible has to say. Suffering is real. Suffering is real in the Bible. We're never told to get over it or to pretend it's not a big deal. You can go read, there's about 40 or 50 songs that are songs that they wrote where they're basically questioning, God, why is this happening? God, this doesn't make sense, right? Suffering is all through the Bible. Suffering is all over the place. There are terrible things that happen to so many people. The Bible does not say it's not real. The Bible absolutely says it. Did you know this? There are only 4 chapters in the whole Bible that suffering does not exist. 2 at the very beginning and 2 at the very end. Everything else in the middle. There is a lot of suffering. The very first 2 chapters, is when God creates the world, and they're in the garden before any sin has ever entered the world. There is no suffering. There is nothing, right? And the last 2 chapters are of John talking about heaven. And he's saying this. He's saying, we're going to read it. Look at Revelation 21:14. This is John telling us what heaven is going to be like. The very end of the Bible. It says that God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. So before we just I've been really sad this week because I've been working on suffering all week. It's not been fun. I've been very non-talkative at home and just ugh, right? And so I want us to get this picture in our mind first. There is a day. We serve a God who wants to get rid of our suffering. If you go anywhere else in the world, if you have atheist friends, agnostic friends, Muslim friends, whatever, none of their God does this. None of their God has a plan to fix their suffering. None of their God has a plan. None of their God is in control. We're the only people who have a God who says, I'm in control of all things, and I'm going to make this right. I'm going to fix this. And that's the picture we get. There will be no more tears, no more death, no more sorrow, no more crying, no more pain. You and I are going to experience suffering, but we have to experience it knowing God is going to fix it one day. In the end, there will be no more suffering. Is that for everyone? Only the people that go down the right path. Only the people will who's gonna be fixed and made right in the end?
Those who believe that Jesus came down and died for us.
Those who Jesus died for, right? And what will everyone else experience for the rest of eternity? Suffering, right? Eternal separation from God. That's not something we just like to talk about, right? The only exit strategy from suffering is what? Is Jesus. The only way we can ever be free of suffering is a relationship with God through Jesus. That's number one. Number two, what does the Bible have to say about suffering? God is sovereign. Sovereign. And I didn't just write that and leave it there because I don't know how to define sovereign. If you asked me to, so I wrote some more. He is in control of all things, and He has a plan for all things, including suffering. God is sovereign. He is in control of all things, and He has a plan for all things, including suffering. Let's look at these verses. Colossians 1. Think about what it says and how God is in control of all things. He says, Christ is the visible image of the invisible God. He existed before anything was created and is supreme or sovereign over all creation. For through Him, through Jesus, God created everything in the heavenly realms and on earth. He made the things that we can see and the things we can't see, such as thrones, kingdoms, rulers, and authorities in the unseen world. Everything was created through Him and for Him. He existed before anything else, and He holds all creation together. This is our God. He is not small. And what I want you to understand, maybe more than anything else tonight, we're not going to get through half of the sheet now that I'm looking at it. If your God is small, if He's like you, if you just think that He's kind of like just little bitty and not in control, then when you go through suffering, your God is going to crumble because He's not strong enough to deal with it. But the God of the Bible is big. He existed before anything else. He holds all creation together. That means that your body would fall apart right now if Jesus did not hold it together. Your lungs would stop breathing right now if Jesus decided not to hold all creation together. There would be winter storms and things that we could not even imagine if Jesus did not have control of all things. Right? That is the God that we serve. And if your God in your mind is really small, and He's going to crumble when you go through something. What I want you to have is a big view of God, because that's the Bible's view of God. Look at Job. Job goes through some terrible things in his life, and you can go read a whole bunch about him. And he questions whether God is good and whether God is in everything. And God shows up and hits him in the face. He's like, yeah, I'm good. And here's what Job says after he realizes how big God is. He says, I know that you can do anything and that no one can stop you. That's a big God. That's a sovereign God who's over all and in control of all. That's not a small God that is caught off guard by losing a boyfriend, or caught off guard by losing a friend or a parent. A God that's caught off guard by, I didn't realize that was going to happen, right? This is a God who knows everything, and that should scare us and excite us all at the same time. Right? Look at Psalms 115. This is how David describes it. He says, our God is in the heavens, and he does as he wishes. Our God is in the heavens, and he does what he pleases. What pleases him. What he wishes. No one tells God what to do. That's the God that we serve. No one catches God off guard. I want you to see this big view of God. Look at Daniel 4, verse 35. It says, all the people of the earth are nothing compared to him, to God. He does as he pleases among the angels of heaven and among the people of earth. No one can stop him or say to him, what did you mean by doing these things? Daniel has a big view of God. Daniel got thrown in a lion's den. Daniel got exiled from his country. Daniel got beaten. Daniel got all kinds of things happen to him. He goes, before we suffer, we're tempted to think that we're in control of our lives. We're tempted to think that we make all the decisions. If I try out for this, I'll make the team. If I want to date him, I'll date him. If I want to date her, I'll date her. If I want to go to this and do this, if I want to be successful, whatever, right? We think that we're in control of our life. But when we go through suffering, when things fall apart around us, a divorce or death or someone hates us or does something terrible to us, when we go through that, what do we realize? We realize we're really not in control. And we long for someone to be in control. Our world is spinning, is one way to say it. And we want somebody who can grab it and go, no, it's in control. Right? We're tempted to think that we're in control. That's number 3. What does the Bible have to say about suffering? Our suffering exposes our weaknesses and our lack of control of our own life. Our suffering exposes 2 things, our weakness and our lack of control of our life. It's meant to show us that God is in control of all things. That's why we go through suffering. God wants to show us. Whoa! God is speaking right now. What was that? What was that? Our suffering exposes our weaknesses. Look at 2 Corinthians chapter 12. Paul was an amazing man of God, an incredible missionary, and he had been through some suffering. Paul had. He called it his thorn in his flesh. We don't know what it was. It could have been something physical, like he couldn't walk well. It could have been something physical, like he couldn't speak well, or he had headaches, or he was blind. People have guessed all kinds of things. But Paul had been through it, and he was done. He was tired of it, and he pleaded with God to take it away. And this is what he says, I pleaded with God 3 times. And here's what God says in verse 9. He says, each time, God said, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. My grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. Paul says, so I am now glad to boast about my weaknesses. No one boasts about their weaknesses. Jordan and I were just talking about powerlifting. No one goes to a powerlifting meet and goes, you know what? I lifted the least out of everyone there. No one comes home going, wow, I only squatted 125, right? No one does that. We don't boast we don't go, I struck out 7 times today. Everyone else batted around, right? No one boasts, lowest grade in the class. Give me a ribbon, right? We do not boast about our weaknesses. What do we boast about? We boast about our strengths, about our accomplishments. Why? Because we think we're in control. We think that we're strong. And one thing that suffering does is show that we are not in control and we are not strong. But we do serve a God who is in control and a God who is strong. He says, I boast about my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ can work through me. That's why I take pleasure in my weaknesses and in the insults and hardships and persecutions and troubles that I suffer for Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. All right, one of the things you'll learn in suffering is that you are weak, is that you aren't in control, you aren't strong, you don't determine your own destiny. God does. Let's look at one more. We got time for one more. Number 4. And maybe the most important one. God sent Jesus to suffer in our place so that we could be healed from all suffering, even if it's not on this earth. God sent Jesus to suffer in our place so we could be healed from all suffering, even if it's not on this earth. I want to read 2 passages of Scripture. Matthew 11. Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you" what? Rest. "Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find" what? "Rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." See, Jesus has this desire. He sees, remember he came to this earth, he didn't have to, and he lived as a human, and he took our suffering. He experienced everything that we went through. And he looks at us and he says this before he dies: "Come to me. I want to take your burdens away. I want to teach you that there's something better. I want to take that suffering away." And how did Jesus take our suffering away? He did it on the cross. Look at 2 Corinthians chapter 4. 2 Corinthians chapter 4 says this: "We now have this light shining in our hearts, but we ourselves are like fragile clay jars containing this great treasure." What do you know, like clay pots? What do you know about them? Are they strong? No. Right? Think about china. Think about glass bowls in your house, or a pot that you put a plant in, right? They chip easily, they break easily, they crack, and people put them back together, right? They're broken. They're meant for like really delicate things. And he says we have this great treasure in them, right? It's this weird thing that we're weak, but God is strong inside of us, right? And he says this makes it clear that our great power is from God, not from ourselves. We're pressed on every side by troubles, but we're not crushed. We're perplexed, we don't understand, but we're not driven to despair. We're hunted down, but never abandoned by God. We get knocked down, but we're not destroyed. And here's the point. Through suffering, our bodies continue to share in the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be seen in our bodies. Here's what Jesus did on the cross, and then we're done. Jesus took all the suffering that we should have experienced. He took it all the sin that we had committed, all the sin that we would ever commit, and he took it on himself. He paid the price for that sin on the cross. He took it from us. We had immense suffering left to be paid in our life. And Jesus said, "I don't want them to suffer that. God, I can't let them suffer that." So what did Jesus do? He traded places with us. He substituted himself. He took our suffering so that we could have his reward. He died on the cross for us so that we could be healed of our suffering. What I'm not saying is that if you're a Christian, you will not face suffering. What I'm not saying is that once you become a Christian, everything's going to be good. Life's going to be perfect. Jesus is going to take all the bad stuff. Actually, the story gets worse for Christians typically. They get persecuted and hated. But Christians have this hope, and you can go look at the backside of the sheet tonight. I would encourage you to do that. That one day God is going to fix all things. He loved us enough to take our suffering. He loves you enough to take your suffering. He doesn't want you to experience eternity separated from him. He wants you to experience life forever with God. Let me pray. God, I pray that my words may be so safe tonight. God, I pray that those in this room going through suffering, God, sicknesses, family problems, divorce, or broken homes, or broken relationships, or hurt and pain, all kinds of things, God. You see that, God, and you recognize it, and you hurt because of it. God, you didn't, that was not your intention for us. God, and you are a God that is big enough and in control enough that you came and you did something about it. You came to save us. You had Jesus take our place. God, thank you for that gift. You don't deserve that. God, thank you that one day all things will be made right. All things will be perfect. There will be no more suffering, no more tears, no more pain, no more sorrow. God, I pray that each one of these students in here, God, would place their faith in you. God, so that they don't have to experience an eternity separated from you, God, but they can experience life with you, God. God, I love each one of them. I'm thankful for our time together, but I pray that you be with us this week. Help us to be a light. Help us to share that word with our friends. There is hope in the midst of our suffering. His name is Jesus. God, we love you. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.